Right. Wait for what happens. Well, I think we're away. It says we're recording. I'm with Trevor.
Trevor, yeah. My name's Trevor Hodgskin.
Trevor Hodgskin.
Born in September the 4th, 1930.
Now, so, you were a young lad during the occupation.
Yeah, I was a lad. I was, well, the day before my birthday was the day that war was declared. Then the Germans arrived here in the May, I think it was, of the following year, would have been 1940. Right. But the first German I saw was at the corner of Elizabeth Street, which is where the co-op is now, the Georgetown co-op is. And he was guarding Howard Davis Park gates, the back gate. Of course, we hadn't seen Germans then. That was the first one I ever saw. And but all us kids were behind the corner, hiding behind the wall. So it was quite something. Mind you, I was only 9 at the time.
Did your parents let you out to roam? You could do what you want as kids, a gang of kids. You could go out as far as your parents were concerned. That was okay, was it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in those days, all the kids used to walk to school.
The fact that the island was full of armed enemies, that made no difference. You could still walk to school.
Well, we still walked to school. When the Germans first arrived, we had to put up white flags. And what happened there was my mother, there was a Mrs. Noble that lived next door to us in Victoria Park Terrace. And she was French. And during the First World War, she was actually became a refugee. And my mum saw her hanging the washing out. And because this woman was hanging the washing out, she says, "What are you doing hanging the washing out, giving the Germans clean clothes?" And she turned around and said, "Well, I'm not going to run away." She says, "I'm going to let the Germans run over me." She said, "I was a refugee in the last war." And my dad had been in the queue, and that queue at the town hall stretched from the town hall around to the Opera House to try and get on a ticket to get on the boat. When my dad arrived back, my mom had decided that my mom was the one who wore the pants in a way. She said, "We're staying," and that's what happened.
Your dad was English. Right? Your dad was English.
Pardon?
Your father was English.
Oh, my mom and dad were born in. My dad was born in Enfield Lock, near London. And my mom was born in Birmingham.
So when they rounded up,
when
they rounded up a lot of English people, they could have been liable to be rounded up, couldn't they?
Well, that comes another very big story. What happened? The Constable of St. Clement's came with a German to the door at about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and came in and gave us the papers that we were to be at the JMT yard the next day at about 3 o'clock. And I don't know if they were going to give us a bus from St. Nicholas Church to town. I don't know about that. I've forgotten now. But what actually happened, next morning my dad got on his bike. I must just bring you up to date here that Jersey Motor Panels, my dad's workshop, was requisitioned, as all the garages throughout the island were. They were all requisitioned by a company called HKP, Heersgrafe Park, 528. Right. It was 528. And this was really a blessing in disguise, the mere fact that they'd requisitioned the garage, because it gave us the opportunity to get oxygen and acetylene for welding, and also get electrodes. And we could do foreigners.
Were you a petrol serving garage or not?
Oh, no. We were in Bagot Road, just just opposite where Mr. Arthur's shop is. There's a shop there now. There's no workshop there now. It's a block of flats. It was Mr. Polo's ground, and he had where the hairdresser was, Trevor's Hairdressers was years ago. But what happened was my dad got on his, when we got the note to go to Germany, my dad got on his bike the next morning and went up to the HKP office, and there was a German there, a Feldwebel called Kessler. Now, Kessler, not that many people like you talking good about Germans, but this was a particularly good German. And when my dad showed in the papers we got to go to Germany, he bundled my dad in a car, took him up to College House, which is up at Bagatelle, and went there, and Kessler explained that what we'd got, that we got these papers and all that to the commandant's office, and what we were given, that we go on the next boat, not on the first boat. So, but there never was a second boat. All the boats had gone previously to that. So we were very fortunate in a way. And that was all due to Kessler. When we came back, I'll be quite frank, that when my dad came back in the car, I don't know where his bike was then, because he'd cycled up to Bath Street. HKP was on the corner of Vauxhall Street and Bath Street. And I think it's a chemist shop now. I'm not too sure what's there now. A little tiny shop. But Kessler got himself into a lot of trouble. He was in charge of Springfield, of all the motor cars, all the spares and that there. And Pitchers wanted, they'd got 2 Leylands, and the Germans had taken one of their Leyland buses and put it in Springfield. Then the Pitchers had got another Leyland, and the engine was a bit duff. So they spoke to Kessler, and Kessler said, as long as you leave me with a bus that runs, you can swap the engines over. Yeah, but what happened, one of the Germans in the office squealed on him, and he ended up on what they called the East Front, the Russian front.
What rank was Kessler? What rank was he, do you know?
Feldwebel.
Feldwebel, what's that?
Yeah, that's like a sergeant major.
Okay. How? Yeah. What sort of age group was he?
Oh, I would have said, look, I'm guessing now. I dare say he was 35, 40.
Right.
He wasn't a young man, exactly.
Well, I'm intrigued because now we've got this lockdown. They're calling it lockdown. Now, obviously, that's similar to what happened, but you weren't confined in the same way during the occupation, where you could go out and about until curfew was quite late, wasn't it?
Well, that brings another story up from that. During the summer, the curfew was 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
Say till 6 in the morning. The daylight hours, it was no curfew. Then in winter, it was 10 o'clock curfew at night when it was dark.
Right.
Yeah, but down at Grave Gazette here, there, just where I'm living now, which is the avenue, Grave Gazette, and there's some steps that go down. Now, the Germans used to live at a place called Greenbank up the road, which was next door to the hotel. What's that hotel up the road from me?
Ambassador?
Eh?
The Ambassador?
The Ambassador, yeah. Next door, the house next door, the Germans lived there. And further down Eureka Avenue, they've got 2 houses down there. And the White House that was on where the big lawn is next door to Greenbanks. And they used to sit on the beach playing their accordions. They were always on the left-hand side of the steps. And all us, I can say Europeans, all us Jersey people, all the ladies and all the kids were on the other side, on the right-hand side of the steps. And the Germans used to be playing their accordions and singing and all that, not interfering with us in any way. And
like now, Jersey's got a very mixed population. Now then, if you were English, you were liable to be exported. But what other nationalities were here? I mean, if you were the Portuguese here then? Many French? What was the population?
French was quite a lot of French. No Portuguese of any consequence.
Right.
No, I would say that Jersey, before the war, was mainly English and French. And that was it, because the French, and there were a lot of Irish people used to come here to dig the potatoes. You know, that was before the war. And so there were quite a few Irishmen here.
Potatoes during the war. Who dug them during the war?
So they would have been Irishmen. Mr. Lane around the corner, he was Irish. I don't know how he come to be in Jersey, but he was a lighthouse keeper years ago. Yeah. But it's funny, you talk, Mr. Lane, he was one of the lighthouse keepers. You're the one at Greve Desert here and the one at Montoubi. And during the war, he got the job to paint the lighthouses.
Really?
Yeah, they gave him a plank and a ladder. And told him to paint the lighthouse.
I think it's a pot of paint as well.
You know, there was no sort of safety measures in those days. But
so you're a 9-year-old kid, then you're a 10-year-old kid, and it goes on, and you become a 14-year-old, 13-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And obviously your aspirations are developing. Are you aware? Were you aware of it then? Or was it just like a bit of a game for kids? I mean, really, because there was lots of strange things going on, weren't there?
Well, kids knew more about what was going on in the island than anyone else, the kids did. Because there was a film on the other day about Zigzag.
I saw it. I saw Zigzag. It was very interesting, wasn't it? Very interesting.
Yeah, well, Zigzag lived down opposite Robert's Garage in a house called Abalone.
All right.
And because around Greve Desert here, in FB cottages, there were a lot of policemen's sons, people who worked in the prisons and all that sort of thing. And the conversations must have been at home. So we knew all about Zigzag during the war.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember I was researching something and I was looking at some old JEPs after the war, 1946. And he turned up here in a speedboat, an ex-naval speedboat. And he was up to mischief. And they knew he was here, but they didn't know what he was doing. Because he was a jewelleries and all. He used to a great thief, wasn't he? But he turned up here with a gang, and they didn't know why. They wanted to arrest him, but they couldn't. So I think they sent him back to England, but they didn't know what he was up to. But he never really gave up on his, supposedly. I mean, you never encountered him? Obviously, during the war, you never saw anything of him. Your family didn't know him, presumably.
No, nobody didn't know him because he jumped over the prison wall. I think the prison wall, where it was. Where the hospital is now, that wall was at least 40 or 50 feet high. Oh, it was very, very high.
Sure.
And,
what I was amazed, I don't know if it was true, but in that film, for one stunt he did for the Germans, they paid him £100, or the English, I don't know, they paid him £100,000 for one of his things he did, just one of them. So he must have made phenomenal money during the war.
Oh, yeah. It's a very interesting film, actually. But that was, I can't remember the dates, but I know that us kids knew that he basically joined the German army. And it was, don't forget, us kids found out more of what was going on than anyone else. Now, where I'm sitting now, was the German garage. My house wasn't here then. It was a part of next door. And I used to watch the Germans. It was a workshop. And I used to watch them repairing engines and all that, and repairing vehicles. It was just.
Of course, you were supposed to learn. You were supposed to learn German during the war. Did you, in fact, learn German? Did you learn a bit?
Yeah, we had to learn German at school. We had a book called Deutsches Leben.
Right.
And that particular book, I've still got it actually. It's one of those things that you don't, well, I wouldn't throw away. Well, I don't throw books away, I keep them. And I've been to Germany a few times, well, since the war, various trade fairs, and so it's always been useful to have that little bit of knowledge of German.
You'd think the Germans would not want you to speak German because you'd know what they were saying. This is what I always found a bit puzzling. They'd have the population, if they didn't speak any German, they could speak freely, couldn't they? It wouldn't be, But if you all started to learn German, you'd know what they were saying all the time, which it could be helpful, but it could get them into a lot of bother, couldn't it?
I think every German wanted to speak English.
Really?
They really put themselves out to learn the language here.
Really, did they?
It was, I've been watching a lot of war films. I watch all the war films.
Right.
And when you see what the people in England went through during the war, the bombing, and then you look at France, St. Lo, Caen, Bayeux, and all those sort of
cities flattened.
They're absolutely flattened.
Yeah.
Now we could go out. I used to walk to school. I went to the beaches, to La Salle, and I would walk all the way to school, back, and I'd come back for lunch even. The food was always a problem here. There was always a shortage, but my mum and dad managed to get by. I think they bought a little bit on the black market. They used to buy a sugar beet syrup, which was very good. It was made by Mr. Hibbs down at the bottom of Mount Bingham. And it was very tasty, actually. I don't know, it's not a thing that it's treacle, really. It's sugar, black.
Now, were you able to walk all over the island if you wanted to, or were you restricted to St. Clement?
Oh, you couldn't. If you got... we could walk all along the beaches. Like if I used to go down the swimming pool, I used to spend a lot of time at Jersey Swimming Club, see? And the big thing about the swimming pool is that the Germans went there also to the swimming pool. But once they got a costume on, you couldn't tell who was a German or who was anybody else. Well, you could, generally you could. Us kids, we knew one person from another what they were, but they made use of the Jersey Swimming Club. Swimming, and I've seen them, a whole platoon of soldiers come down on the beach at Havedale Park, just facing the Oamaru, and they'd all get undressed and put all their clothes in piles, with their boots standing up and all that. So when they walked down for a swim, their clothes were all lined up, as though, as though they were in the old.
They had guns when they went swimming. Then what did they do with their guns?
They like tripods.
So they left them on the beach. So they.
Yeah, but that was there were people that used to go and pinch them. I won't mention names, but well-known people were involved in occasionally borrowing something off them on the beach. But the one chap got killed during the war was Mason. He was down by what was Barth's Hotel. He was picking a shell, and he picked the percussion cap, and it killed him. One of the Mason boys, yeah.
Well, I was amazed, for example, towards the end of the war, there were lots of youngsters in prison for having arms. Now, I presume if the war had gone a bit longer, a lot of those would have been executed, I presume, but they were in the prison here in Gloucester Street, and I was surprised that they got away what seemed to me relatively lightly, because they had guns and different things. So I was
Well,
surprised.
when they got arrested, when like those chaps, the one was I think it's Leo. um, there was no transport between France and Jersey,
Right.
so they couldn't have taken them anywhere.
That's right, exactly.
So fortunately for them, they didn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
When you look back on the situation, but there was a photograph in the paper last week, and there were 4 or 5 of them who had. They were described as political prisoners.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, political prisoners. But
So about political people, obviously we hear about Norman Le Bloc and the resistance that they did. Did you ever meet them? I mean, obviously you were only a youngster, but he wasn't very old himself, was he? Norman, he was only in his...
Norman always Norman was he ended up as a brilliant statesman, but he always dressed down. Norman did. I knew him quite well because he was a friend of Mike Lecornu, or Mike was Elias, and Elias.
I've interviewed him.
Yeah. You've interviewed him. Yeah. Well, Mike, he calls himself Mike because he's a very strong communist and always has been. But Eli, with the workshop being requisitioned, we used to often get a German vehicle come in. We were not according to the Hague Convention, that if they requisition a workshop, that you can do any work for the enemy as long as it's nothing to do with war.
All right.
You know, so you ended up with a car come in with a bad crash wing or something like that. So you'd repair the wing, but you'd be able to get the raw materials from through this HKP crowd.
Right.
But certain chaps of HKP were not very nice. When I think back on this particular subject, was I'm just trying to think of the chap's name now. Grotz, I think his name was Grotz. And what happened? Well, the bread in they needed salt. So they pumped seawater from Grave Desert Beach to a bakery which was on Grasset Park, opposite where the vets are now. And they used the fire engines, Coventry Climax engines, as pumps to pump the water. Now, one of the things they didn't realize was that the cooling on the Coventry Climax goes through the silencer. And the silencer was made of mild steel. And so the salt water just eroded the silencers. So it ended up that we had to make new silencers for these Coventry Climaxes. Now, there was no electricity in the island, only at night. So we got a permit to say we've got to repair these silencers, and that we were going to work at night. And so I lived at Victoria Park Terrace, and the garage was just 100 yards away in Baggo Road. I used to go with my dad to work on the silencers, well, at least be there with him. And we'd only got electric welding at that particular time, and it was dark. And the light from the electric welding in the really black night shone onto the wall of Harold Polo's house, And it really was brilliant. And what happened? We got the garage door locked, but we got a wicker door. A wicker door is a small door in a big door, and we got and all of a sudden the Fell Gendarmerie, that's the German police, bashed open the door with the butt of his rifle and come in and screamed at us, what are you doing, what doing this. So my dad's very brave because he's got a bit of paper. My dad wasn't brave at any time, not like that. But when you've got a bit of paper, you can sort of get away with it. Then what happened was they stopped us from doing that. So we had to put up curtains all around where we were working. So we went to my dad went to Springfield, and they got all the Rexine from the roofs of cars, right, and made curtains.
Oh, really?
So it went all along the face of Jersey Motor Panels, and then across was a big curtain, and on that curtain, then we repaired the. Then there was no electricity, so to get those silencers done, what happened was the Germans put they put poles up and put electricity all the way from, I think it's Norcott Road, is it? The road that goes up to the Merton by the traffic lights there. And they put it from that substation, they brought power in and to the workshop, and then we could work at night, on these things.
We can't talk forever, but something's always fascinating about the German army that was here. We see all these pictures about men in the army. Were there any women in the German army?
Well, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I mean...
Well, they used to look different. Men and women, even in 1940, looked different, didn't they? A bit. Uniform.
The German uniforms were, the ordinary uniform wasn't very smart, but the officers' uniforms were beautiful. Really, really,
so
really
posh. You don't remember women being in the army? You don't remember them? It was all men.
I didn't see any. To my knowledge, no, there weren't any women. I didn't see any women in the army.
That was because they can fire a gun just as well as anybody else, can't they?
Well, I dare say, up Don Road, there's a house up there that was a dentist. So presumably they had nurses, and that in the where the Merton Hotel is now, that was a hospital, and there was a big red cross on that building for years. And so there could have been women. I wouldn't have known.
As you know, in normal life, we go and have fish and chips very often on a Friday. And when I drive along the coast road, I always get the same feeling that for somehow, I wasn't here, obviously, I wasn't even born when most of this was going on. But I always get the feeling this is where the curfew must have applied. Now, we're driving back at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. There would have been a curfew, but did that? I ask you the question, sir. Did it cause you any trouble? The fact that there was a curfew. If you got caught out in the curfew and you were still out, for children, did it make any difference? Did it make?
Well, I tell you what. I used to go to the town arsenal, which is where the fire police station used to be, or the fire brigade, and I used to go there for first aid lessons with a Mr. Stevens from the animal shelter. And I was coming back, it must have been in the winter, and it must have been about 9:30, 9:45, nearly on curfew time.
Right.
And there was a high-ranking German officer walking behind me.
Right.
And he came up, spoke to me in perfect English, and said, "Young man, this is very late for you to be out at night. Where are you off to, or where have you been?" I said, "Well, I'm on my way home, and I've been to doing St. John's training, ambulance training." and he just carried on. I don't know if we chatted any more than that, but I think he would have lived at Bansha, which is the corner of Green Road and Plackley Road, which I call Bansha still. It was Bansha in those days. It then turned out to be a nunnery. Yeah, yeah. Well, but what else can I tell you? Well, there's so many stories that I can once I get started.
Well, I know. One of the things, we talk about this, we've talked about it over the time. The Germans, they weren't all bad. In fact, the more I hear, there weren't so many bad ones at all. Yet every year we have to have this celebration. And somehow they talk about the Germans as being the enemy. Well, it is a long time ago, isn't it? Does that bother you at all that they're now still talking about the Germans? They were the enemy, but they're not the enemy now, are they?
No, I don't. I mean, it's funny. I think Jersey people had the cushy number during the war compared with the English people. We had we slept at night. We were very short of food at times. A friend of mine, Clive, we were walking along by the FB fields there, just near Bansha, and we were chatting about one thing and the other, and he's got under his bed, he'd got a load of Swedes, which he put there, and he said, "I haven't told my dad."
Really?
Yeah, no, and that was Clive, and we had good theatre here during the war. You know, it was amazing. The theatre clubs, they put on plays and all sorts of things, and they had talent shows, a bit like you see on the television these days. They had some very good ones. This chap, Clive's dad, did a thing. Yes, we have no bananas. And I'm telling you now, that was one of the songs he sang. And this chap walked with a limp, and he worked for the gasworks. This chap, he used to push a barrow.
Everybody's talking now because of the virus when life gets back to normal. Okay, we don't know when it'll be, and of course you didn't know when it would be then during the occupation.
No.
But after the occupation, after the Germans went, how quickly did it get back to normal?
Well, I went to my grandparents in Birmingham. They'd been through a rough time, and we managed to get to England in about July,
Right.
August, and
1945.
Yeah, 1945.
Really?
And it was funny when you see. When we arrived at Snow Hill Station in Birmingham, we came up there. There's a church, the cathedral, and there was a big churchyard there. And we waited for the 24 bus there. I can remember this. And all the Americans and the girls were all laying on the grass there. And it was something we'd never, ever seen in Jersey. It was quite alien to my mum to see. So much so she commented on it. You know, it wasn't one or two; it was hundreds of them. Really? You know, the screen patch in front of the.
I mean, of course, the force that came here. My friends, you know, Sandra, her father was one of the liberation, but they were only here for a few months, weren't they? They were gone very quickly. Because they'd shipped them up after about 3 months, they were all sent back to England, or most of them. There was hardly any, a few kept on for getting rid of bombs, but mostly they were only here for a couple of months.
You know, I'm very guilty. I'm going to admit to something. I'm very guilty of something. Where my gran lived on Yardleywood Road in Birmingham, there's a park called Cannon Hill Park. And it was a German prisoner of war camp. Right. The Germans were there, but when I got there in the July and the August, they were walking around outside the camp, no guards or anything like that. They seemed to be walking around. And very naughtily, I was on one side of the road and I whistled a German marching tune being nasty to the German on the other side of the road.
Your turn now.
I
You would do that, wouldn't you? I mean, that's what you would do, wouldn't you?
I,
A little mild retaliation, just a mild one, just nothing too serious. Just to take a little bit. You'd want to do that when you just tease them a bit.
teasing, yeah. It was teasing, really, yes. But, yeah.
We better stop. I could talk to you. We must do this again. We must talk to other things.
It's been very interesting, but once you start and get me going, I can answer your questions easy.
I've got to find out how to stop it now, because this is one of the things about Skype. Everybody's doing it.
Press that red button. You've got a red button there.
I want to save it first. I got to make sure I save it. Stop recording, right? Let's do that.